In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. For anything more.
Bone-anza.
Thank you. Bone-anza. Thank you.
Bone-anza.
Count it. Bone-anza. Thank you. We're having a bonanza.
Bone-anza.
Thank you. Thank you. Count it. Count it.
Bone-anza. Bone-anza.
Bonanza. Bonanza.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. I'm Sophie Schwartz.
And I'm Katelyn Hart. Hi, everyone. How are you today?
It's a beautiful day in the wintertime, and that means it's time for another bonanza.
Yeah, it's a bonanza round 2. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I loved how much other people loved the first bonanza, so we were thinking about doing them on a regular basis.
Yeah, we'll do it on a monthly basis, see how it goes.
Yeah, and if you have any bonanza themes or bonanza topics that you want to hear about, you can email them to us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see if they fit into a bonanza theme, or maybe they'll get their own episode.
Who knows? Yeah, I'd love to get an email. Go ahead and shoot us an email about bones, if you please.
But I would like it to be very formal. I think it should open with like, "My dearest bone women, how have you been subsisting over this troubled time?"
Yeah, I want to be called madam. They need to use the word thee a lot.
A thou, maybe?
Thee and thou, please. And, you know, if it's a poem, so be it.
I won't turn my nose up at a poem about us or about bones.
Yeah.
Or about birds. Birds are the most poetic animal.
What? I guess birds have bones, so.
They have hollow bones.
Really?
Yeah, that's how they're light enough to fly, because their bones are hollow.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I guess I just didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. This bonanza hasn't even started, and I'm learning new things.
That's the power of the bonanza.
Incredible.
It touches all things.
Thank you.
Okay, so since you chose the theme for this bonanza, would you care to explain it?
Yeah. I'm happy to do that. I decided that the theme should simply be the oldest bone you can think of.
The absolute oldest, the dustiest, ricketiest, old, fucked up bones.
I just wanted it to be pretty vague. So just ancient or old. Hashtag
Antiquity.
Yes, hashtag antiquity.
Hashtag antiquity, hashtag bay, hashtag hunting for bones, hashtag dusty fucked up.
You can decide whether or not to cut this out later.
It's staying in. Don't lean away.
Anyway, the theme is old stuff having to do with bones.
Yeah, plain and simple. It's
Yeah,
not overcomplicated.
Yeah, we're going old school.
Yes, these are OG bones.
Let's kick it old school.
Let us kick it old school. So, would you care to start out, or shall I?
I'm happy to go first. I'm ready to go. So, my first article that I'm going to share with you in this bonanza is from CNN.com, popular site. And the date on this one is November 21st, 2020. That's my dad's birthday.
Happy birthday, Papa Hart.
Yes. Bodies of rich man and slave discovered within Pompeii ruins.
Ooh.
The story is by Reuters, and I found it on CNN. Couldn't find the author's name. Archaeologists apparently this year, 2020, have discovered the exceptionally well-preserved remains of 2 men that died in the volcanic eruption that destroyed Pompeii in 79 AD.
Ooh.
This is cool to me. Pompeii is fascinating to me. I've never been, but the idea that life on that day was just frozen and everything was gone. Everyone was dead. but these casts of people remain. I just remember thinking about that as a kid, like, I want to go there.
Yeah, same. I think we were talking about this the other day, but Pompeii was one of the things that first got me into Bones, because it's that morbid curiosity of like the frozen last moments, like when they turned around and was like, oh, that's a pyroclastic flow.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. I had never heard that term before finding this article. Pyroclastic current.
Ooh. Yeah, it always freaked me out, because isn't it just like a rolling thing of like hot rocks and smoke and...
Well, I'm going to get to it, so.
I'm sorry. I love volcanoes. Bones and volcanoes.
Bones, volcanoes, what's going on here? So they know that one of the men was high status, between 30 and 40 years old, and he also had traces of a woolen cloak under his neck still.
Mm.
The other man was about 18 to 23. He was in a tunic, and he had a number of crushed vertebrae. So it indicated that he was a slave who did heavy labor.
Mm.
The remains were found in an underground chamber in the area of a large villa that was being excavated in Civita Giuliana, 700 meters northwest of the center of Pompeii. This is a quote from Massimo Ossana, the director of the archaeological site. These two victims were perhaps seeking refuge when they were swept away by the pyroclastic current at about 9 in the morning. It is a death by thermal shock, as also demonstrated by their clenched feet and hands. Oh, yeah. Hold on. I'm going to send you the picture. This is them.
Oh, wow. So it's two of these, if you're familiar at all, listener, with the like ash casts in Pompeii, you know that they're these kind of faceless human shapes. They look like statues, basically. And we've got these two people, and they're both laying on their backs, and they do look like they are in pain.
Yeah, it looks very, very bad. But yeah, for our listeners, I'm going to post this picture on our Facebook and Instagram, which is Anything Bones Podcast. Yeah, Pompeii is fascinating to me because of what we're looking at right here. Just this frozen moment in time that's horrifying, but also fascinating, and a glimpse into the year 79 AD. Like, can you even imagine what that was like?
No, and it's so cool that they still have inside of the encasing, they have stuff like the textiles he was wearing, because that stuff degrades really easily. It's hard to find clothing from that far back because clothing disintegrates so easily. So it's so cool that we have another detail, like you said, into the lives of people who lived so long ago.
So long ago. And okay, so just as kind of a refresher on things in Pompeii.
Please.
In Pompeii. You know, whatever.
What was going on? What was the haps in
What was
Pompeii?
the vibe?
What was the vibe?
Probably good and then very, very not good. Pompeii is 14 miles southeast of Naples, Italy, and there were about 13,000 people there when this volcanic eruption buried the whole city and all the people in it under ash, pumice pebbles, and dust. Remains weren't discovered until about the 16th century, and then excavations actually started in around 1750. And then recently, so like I said, this article was released on November 21st, 2020, attention has focused on, quote, arresting the decay or collapse of the exposed ruins.
Oh,
I dropped my iPad. Sorry.
Be careful. Those things are expensive.
I know. I just dropped it on my bed because that's the end of my story. So I flung my iPad away from my phone.
Yeah, because you definitely won't need it in another couple of minutes.
Anyway, Pompeii, that's how I'm going to start this very old bonanza.
Well, that's fascinating. I always like an update from Pompeii. It's an ongoing look into one day in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Fucking fascinating.
What you got?
Oh, me? What do I have? Only the oldest Homo sapien bones ever found.
Where?
Well, I got this information from an article from The Guardian, and it was written by our friend Ian Sample, who sounds like a fake person.
Sample as a last name is a little bit confusing. It's a cool last name, but it that would confuse me.
It just sounds like a robot that's trying to be human. Like they were like, I will think of a name later. For now, you can call me Ian Sample.
It's like having the last name of Example.
Yes, exactly. Okay, but back to the oldest Homo sapien remains. Okay, so the title of this article is Oldest Homo sapien Bones Ever Found Shake Foundations of Human History.
Okay. When did this come out?
This came out in 2017. So This is a little older, but it's very interesting because basically there's so before this, it was kind of accepted that what we consider modern humans, Homo sapiens, kind of popped up about 200,000 years ago in Eastern Africa. But this challenges that because these remains were found in Morocco and they are 300,000 years old.
Whoa.
Yeah. So these fossils were found in an old mine on a desolate mountain in Morocco, and they are thought to be 300,000 years old. Archaeologists unearthed the bones of at least 5 people at Jebel Hound, a former barite mine 100 kilometers west of Marrakesh, in excavations in the last few years. They knew that these remains were old, but they were particularly stunned when dating revealed that, so they were carbon dating this tooth, and they found that the tooth and stone tools that were found with the bones were about 300,000 years old.
Wow. And previously, how old were the last oldest bones, did you say before that?
The oldest bones we have are from more like 200,000 years ago.
So this is a big, huge leap. This is a huge discovery.
Yeah, and there's a fun quote from the article. This is a quote from Jean Humblin, who is a senior scientist on the team at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. And they said, quote, "My reaction was a big wow. I was expecting them to be old, but not that old."
Yeah, no shit.
when you get that out of an archaeologist, it's like, fuck. Like, they're older than you thought that they would be? That's old. And so these finds are significant because they challenge the idea that we came from this Garden of Eden in East Africa 100,000 years later. And Humblin has another quote that says, quote, "This gives us a completely different picture of the evolution of our species. It goes much further back in time, but also the very process of evolution is different to what we thought. It looks like our species was already present, probably all over Africa by 300,000 years ago. If there was a Garden of Eden, it might have been the size of a continent."
Wow. Cool.
So it totally expands this idea of where humans were and what they were doing before we had previously thought.
Yeah. Very old bones.
Yeah, and this site has always kind of thrown a wrench into kind of the conventional ideas about evolution because they started finding bones and fossils here around the 1960s, and they were attributed to Neanderthals and at first considered only to be about 40,000 years old. And so that kind of contributed to this idea that Neanderthals were a sister group that lived alongside with Homo sapiens, but that stuff is now believed to be much older with our modern techniques of dating.
Yeah.
So in these fresh excavations, Humblin and others found remains including a partial skull, a jawbone, teeth, and limb bones belonging to 3 adults, a juvenile, and a child aged about 8 years old. The remains resemble modern humans more than any other species and were recovered at the base of an old limestone cave that had its roof smashed in during mining operations. So I just love this quote that Humblin gives, because I feel like this is something like you and I relate to a lot. She says, quote, "It's a rather desolate landscape, but on the horizon you have the Atlas Mountains with snow on its top. It's very beautiful. When we found the skull and mandible, I was emotional. They are only fossils, but they have been human beings, and very quickly you make a connection with these people who lived and died here 300,000 years ago."
Amazing. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and it's just cool because they were saying that the skulls of these people that they found, if they reconstructed the faces, we would recognize them like as people. They would look like people. They might have a bit of a kind of a crazy brow ridge, and the back of their heads are a little bit more elongated. So it's kind of cool because they hypothesize that instead of inheriting our like head shape from our ancestors, it actually evolved to be more rounded rather than like elongated.
Huh. I wonder what purpose that serves.
I don't know.
More attractive?
More attractive, or probably something with the evolution of our brains and the shape of our brains and the size of our brains. Our brains are like a big deal. They're very complicated.
Anything bones. Our brains are like a big deal.
I want a mug with our brains are like a big deal on it.
Yeah, your brain has to rest inside of a bone, so it all tracks.
Exactly. All right. You got something old for me?
Yeah, I got something kind of old. This is the tragic story behind Seattle's biggest cemetery.
Hey.
This is by Kate O'Connell. It was released on April 10th, 2018. It's from kuow.org, which also has something to do with NPR. So, city founders David Denny and Louisa Boren had 2 children. This is in the mid to late 1800s, and lost one of their twin infants. It sounded like they buried him and then the cemetery got moved, and so they had to bury him somewhere else, and then that happened again. Seattle was just growing, and so cemeteries kept getting kind of pushed out, or they would have to close. And so the Dennys decided to bury their son on land that is actually north of the city. Now it's known as Evergreen Washelli on Aurora Street.
I think I have driven by this place.
I definitely have. It's by the Home Depot.
Hey! Is it up by, you drive by there to go the COVID testing place?
You can. Yeah. It's all up there, up in Aurora and Shoreline area.
Woo. For our Seattle, for our Seattle listeners. I said woo, not boo.
Oh, I misheard.
Shoreline, boo.
No, I have nothing against Shoreline. Been there a few times to get COVID tests that have all come back negative, thank goodness.
Yay.
Okay, so this land, it's kind of farther away from where Seattle was really, the heart of Seattle was, and where it was developing the most. Eventually, more and more people started burying their loved ones there, coming to them and saying, hey, can I bury somebody on your property? And then over time, it became a privately owned cemetery. It was developed, this is a quote from Scott Sheehan, who is the general manager of the Evergreen Washelli Cemetery. And I really hope I'm saying it correctly, Washelli. Washelli. So, quote, Washelli was developed out here in 1884 because of the growth within Seattle. And today it takes up a piece of land that is about the size of an 18-hole golf course.
Damn, that's big.
It has more than 160,000 remains, both cremated and buried. And like we were saying, so we've both driven past here, it is a grassy area with a lot of trees, a lot of greenery, a lot of graves, obviously, in the middle of a very busy city. Like I said, it's by a Home Depot. You have to drive by a UW hospital, I believe, over there, or an office.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this piece of greenery and old preserved Seattle history in the midst of this kind of bustling city. And it's beautiful. And every time I've driven past it, I'm just like, whoa, I want to get out and explore.
We will definitely have to go in and take a walk in that cemetery because it looks beautiful. And like you were kind of hinting at, it's full.
It looks very crowded, and it started in 1884, like fascinating. Okay, so the founder, of course, hopes that it will remain largely untouched. That's kind of the whole point. The founders, David Denny and Louisa Boren, who started the cemetery, wanted it to be a place that would not be touched by the city, even though the city was always expanding. And the current management wants to continue that, and they don't want the city to take over any part of this cemetery.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's Seattle history.
Yeah, but I'm about to drop some information on you that I think will interest you and why I chose this topic.
Okay.
Quote, a long-standing moratorium is in place banning the expansion of old cemeteries and the creation of new ones in Seattle.
Oh. Really?
So, yeah. Quote, a long-standing moratorium is in place banning the expansion of old cemeteries and the creation of new ones in Seattle.
So you can't build a cemetery in Seattle.
You can't expand old cemeteries and you can't create new ones in Seattle.
So where do we bury? Wait. So where do we bury people?
So the manager that I told you about earlier, Sheehan, says they're not worried. They're not going to run out of space for a long time. Partly because this area has the highest cremation rate in the country at about 77%.
Huh.
So
Okay.
according to one city office, no planning work has been done about graveyards for decades in Seattle.
That's so wild.
Isn't that weird? Like, I kind of want to do, I just looked at this article because I wanted to talk to you about it in the Bone-anza, but I'm writing this down for later because I kind of want to dig into this. No pun intended, honestly. I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I wonder why that is, other than just like historical preservation. But I wonder why Seattle has that particular ordinance.
Yeah. Well, and not even that, like you can't expand old graves. Like you need to keep them exactly the size that they are. And no others can be added, apparently.
2 old graves?
What?
Wait, so I don't think I'm understanding quite correctly. Like,
So
no.
if you can't add any land to a cemetery that's in place right now, and nobody can make a new cemetery.
But you can bury new people in the cemetery.
Of course, yeah, of course. But
Okay.
you can't create a new cemetery, a whole new cemetery. You have to either put them in an existing cemetery right now or have them cremated, scatter the remains. There's a lot of new eco-friendly kind of graves now where you can become a tree or things like that, which I think are really interesting. So I don't know, are cemeteries becoming like more and more unpopular? You know, like are people just getting cremated and having their ashes scattered, or getting cremated and having their ashes in a cemetery? But that doesn't take up as much space. So it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's in a lot of other countries, there's a big problem with like land and space for cemeteries. You know, they're running out of space. In other countries, people rent graves for an amount of time and then they're exhumed and put somewhere else. And like America is interesting because we have so much land and so much space, yet, you know, cremation is still at a pretty high rate.
Especially here, apparently 77% roughly.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah, and it sounded like the manager of this cemetery sometimes gets approached by developers wanting to take over this space, but they always turn them away. And this is the quote I want to end on. Quote, this is from Sheehan. "We will always be part of Aurora Avenue. We will always be a part of Seattle. We will never go away. This will be an icon that will be here for hundreds of years to come, we hope."
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Fight the power. Don't let Amazon take our fucking cemeteries.
Exactly. Exactly.
You will not shit on my grave, Jeff Bezos. But that's fascinating. Thanks for finding that.
Yeah, that was a good find. I thought you would like that, and I plan on doing a deeper dive on that another time.
Sweet. Well, on the topic of burials,
Okay.
would you like to hear about one of the oldest tombs that exists?
I would.
So this is New Grange in County Meath, Ireland. So New Grange is a prehistoric monument in Ireland. It is exceptionally grand passage tomb built in the Neolithic period around 3200 BC, making it older than Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids.
Whoa. That really
Yeah.
puts it in perspective.
Yeah, that shows you how fucking old this passage tomb is.
Whoa.
So I'm getting my information from Wikipedia and also from worldheritageireland.ie.
Nice.
Okay, so I'm going to describe to you a little bit of what this tomb looks like. We'll slap a picture up on the Instagram for you to take a look at because it's beautiful. It's a pretty cool site. So the site consists of a large cylindrical mound with an inner stone passageway and chambers. And then the mound has a retaining wall at the front, mostly made of white quartz cobblestones, and is ringed by engraved curbstones. And many of the larger stones at New Grange are covered in this really cool Neolithic art. And then this whole tomb, this whole like mound and all these stones are then encircled by kind of like a Stonehenge vibe type stone circle on the outside.
What?
Yeah, and some of the material that make up the monument come from as far away as the Wicklow Mountains. So they moved this stone. What's cool about this mound is that there's not a lot of consensus as to what the site is used for, but it's believed to be a tomb and a place of religious significance for people during the Neolithic era.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Another cool thing is that its entrance is aligned with the rising sun on the winter solstice. So when the sun shines through this little roof box, this little like hole in the top of the mound on the winter solstice, sunlight shines through and floods the inner chamber with light. And this is a common theme of several other passage tombs that are in Ireland and also in Scotland. So it's interesting to think that there is this focus on the celestial with these tombs.
Very cool. Ooh, spooky.
Yeah. And so some people estimate that the monument could have taken 5 years to build based on the number of like local inhabitants during the Neolithic period. But our man, Michael O'Kelly, who was part of the archaeological team who kind of did the first excavations on this site in the 1960s and 70s, says, no, it probably took more like 30 years to build.
Sure, yeah. They didn't have tools. They had to make every tool. So let's be realistic.
And they had to bring the stones from pretty far away. So it was quite an undertaking.
Sure.
So excavations have revealed deposits of both burnt and unburnt human bone in the passage, indicating human corpses had been placed within it, some of whom had been cremated.
Okay.
So from examining the unburnt bone, it shows that they came from at least 2 separate individuals, but much of their skeletons are missing.
Oh, yikes.
Right?
Okay.
And they found like various grave goods in this tomb as well. Some pendants, some beads, a bone chisel, and some bone pins.
Okay.
So the archaeologist Michael O'Kelly, who led the original excavations on the site, believed that Newgrange, along with the hundreds of other passage tombs built in Ireland during the Neolithic, showed evidence for a religion that venerated the dead as one of its core principles. He believed that this cult of the dead was just one particular form of European Neolithic religion, and other Mesolithic monuments displayed evidence for different religious beliefs that were solar-oriented rather than ancestor-oriented. So kind of, again, going back to that focus on the winter solstice, which was kind of in their religion like the start of the new year.
Mm-hmm.
So, birth, death, life, giant stone monument.
Some cyclical kind of, seems like ritualistic.
Yeah. And I just can't get over we'll put a picture of this on the Instagram as well. But if you look at pictures of the sun coming in this like shaft, so once a year at the winter solstice, the rising sun shines directly along the long passage, illuminating the inner chamber and revealing carvings inside, notably a triple spiral on the front wall of the chamber. This illumination lasts for approximately 17 minutes. And they think that this illumination today, it's about 4 minutes after sunrise that this will happen. But they think that at the time when it was built, it was like would happen right at sunrise.
Cool. Once a year?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Cool.
Yeah, so built with a very specific purpose that we have no idea what it is.
Ooh. Ooh, cool. Very cool.
What do you got?
Is it my turn?
Bones. I think it's your turn because that's the end of my story. About the old tomb.
All right. Well, I've got someone I want you to meet.
Ooh, a new friend.
Yes. Meet Stucky, the mummified dog who has been stuck in a tree for over 50 years.
Oh, Stucky.
Stucky. This is from allthat'sinteresting.com, and it is by Katie Serena, and it was published in January 2018.
Ooh. Tell me about the doggy.
Loggers in Georgia were working on a grove of chestnut oaks, and they found something pretty crazy. They cut off the top of a tree, loaded it into their truck, and then somebody looked in, and in the hollow trunk, he found, quote, the perfectly mummified remains of a dog looking back at him, its teeth still barred in a fight for survival.
Oh, buddy.
I know.
How'd you get in there?
I know. I'm going to send you a picture of Stucky. Oh, you might not like it.
Oh, Lord. That is terrifying. I feel bad for this dog.
I should have told you a little sooner. You wouldn't like it.
The eyes are bad. Grace, don't look at
the teeth are the scariest part to me. Again, listeners, never fear. We will put this on the Instagram and Facebook.
Oh, but you might not want to see it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
my. No, it's okay. I just... I do agree. The teeth are the most horrifying part. If I had to pick a part to be...
Yeah. I've been with Stucky a little bit longer than you have. And
That's
think it's the teeth.
Well, you're the expert.
Okay. Speaking of experts who studied Stucky think that he was a hunting dog from the 60s who probably chased like a squirrel or a mouse or something through a hole in the roots of the tree, and up the center, the tree just got narrower and narrower. And because of the position of Stucky's paws, he probably just kind of wedged himself in there and couldn't turn around. And so he died in there.
Mm.
Yeah. So normally, of course, if an animal dies in the wilderness, there's scavengers, the elements, all kinds of stuff are going to sort of mess with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But because he was up in a tree, like so far up, it was pretty unlikely that other animals could smell him or like get to him.
Mm-hmm.
And the tree that Stucky was in actually was uniquely qualified for this kind of natural mummification procedure. Chestnut oaks have tannins, which I talked about a little bit in our very first episode about when I talked about a peat bog body.
Yeah.
So tannins are used in taxidermy and tanning to treat like pelts and animal skins so they don't decay. And so tannins inside the tree seeped into the dog's remains and prevented it from rotting, basically. And it was a very dry environment inside a tree. Again, the elements didn't get to it, animals didn't get to it, and it was almost like a vacuum in there. And the picture that I sent you is the dog and the part of the tree are actually on display, just like that in that picture, at the Southern Forest World Museum. And I'm guessing that's in Georgia, where Stucky was found.
Oh, Stucky. Thank you for bringing Stucky.
I'm sorry, Stucky.
He was a good boy. He was just doing what his master wanted him to do.
Probably, or yeah, he just really wanted a squirrel.
He did. He wanted a squirrel so badly.
Did you ever have a dog, Soph?
I did have a dog. My family had a Yorkie named Olivia.
Oh.
Who was very cute, but also very annoying.
My parents and I had a Sheltie named Gracie, and she was real cute. She really thought she was cool when it came to squirrels, but she was not tough at all.
Yeah, no, my dog was not tough either.
All right, I think you're up.
Well, again, a nice dovetail into my story because I'm going to talk about the oldest intentionally made mummies.
Oh, okay.
So I think a lot of people, when they think about mummies, they tend to think about Egyptian culture, right?
I was just going to say that. First thing that comes to my mind is ancient Egypt.
Well, mummies that are even older than that come from Chile.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. The Chinchero mummies are mummified remains of individuals from the South American Chinchero culture found in what is now northern Chile. They are the oldest examples of artificially mummified human remains that have been buried up to 2,000 years before the Egyptian mummies.
That's a long time.
Right?
2,000 years previous?
Right?
Okay.
So this information is from Wikipedia. The earliest mummies that have been found in Egypt dated to around 3000 BC. The oldest anthropologically modified Chinchoreo mummies date from around 5050 BCE. So old.
Very old.
Very old. So while many cultures throughout the world have sought to focus on preserving the dead elite, the Chinchoreo tradition performed mummification on all members of their society, making them anthropologically significant.
Yeah.
So the decision of egalitarian preservation is proven in the mummification of less productive members of society. I mean, that's not my wording. That's fucking Wikipedia. Because, their definition of less productive members of society are the elderly, children and infants, and miscarried fetuses.
Oh my God.
Those miscarried fetuses are so unproductive.
Oh my God.
But it is interesting because the children and the babies actually received the most elaborate mummifications.
Oh.
I know. So their mummification process is interesting because it changes throughout the years and throughout the period that this culture was active. But there were kind of identified to be 3 different types of mummies that this culture would make during different periods. So Friedrich Max Ole, so he was a German archaeologist whose work in Peru and Chile and Ecuador really impacted the practice of archaeology in South America. But he categorized 3 types of mummification: simple treatment, complex treatment, and mud-coated mummies. And he believed that these were like chronological. They happened kind of one after another. So there were 3 types of mummies for this culture: natural, black manganese mummies, and red mummies.
Okay.
So I will kind of walk you through each of these mummification processes because they're pretty interesting.
Thank God. I thought you were going to just leave me hanging at that.
No. Okay. So the black mummy technique, that was probably used from 5,000 to 3,000 BCE. This involved taking the dead person's body apart, treating it, and then reassembling it. So the head, arms, and legs were removed from the torso. The skin was often also removed. Then the body was heat dried, and the flesh and tissue were completely stripped from the bones. And then they reassembled the body and covered it with white ash paste, like filling in all the gaps with like grass and ash and soil. And then they also used that paste to like fill in the person's facial features. Then they would put a wig of short black human hair on the head. Then the skin was painted with a layer of black manganese. So that's black mummies.
Oh my goodness.
You ready for red mummies?
Yes. Sorry, I have to collect myself. Yes.
Okay, so red mummy technique was 2500 BCE to 2000 BCE. So this technique, they wouldn't disassemble the body. Rather, there were many incisions made in the trunk and shoulders to remove internal organs and dry the body cavity. The head was cut from the body so that the brain could be removed, after which the skin would be pasted back on, which would often be covered with a clay mask. Then the body was packed with various materials to return it to kind of a normal looking state, because, people kind of dry out and they shrivel up. And kind of want to plump them back up, And then the head was placed back on the body, again, a wig that was a little longer, and a hat made of black clay placed on top of the wig. And then everything was painted with red ochre.
Okay.
Red mummies. Final one, it's the mud-coated mummy.
Okay.
So
I think, just a guess.
Yeah?
Is mud going to be involved?
You bet it is.
Ding, ding, ding. Thank you.
Ding, ding, dong, ding. Okay, so this final style of mummification was between 3000 to 1300 BCE. These mummies were coated in a layer of clays and gypsum, which acted as cementing agents, and a natural desiccant. So, acted to get the moisture out of the body.
Right.
This malleable clay allowed for morticians to mold and create the colorful appearances of the mummies, with added bonus that the foul smell would be covered up. Artisans no longer removed the organs of the dead. Instead, a thick coating of mud and sand and a binder like egg or fish glue was used to cover the bodies. Once completed, the mummies were cemented into their graves. And this style may have come from exposure to outsiders and their different cultures, or from the association of disease of rotting corpses. So this technique was very protective.
Yes.
So I just wanted to share with you these amazing mummies that were the original mummies.
In Chile.
In Chile. Sorry, Egypt.
I guess.
It's just interesting to see how different cultures preserve their bodies and how the preservation of bodies evolved over time.
Definitely.
And a common link, between Egyptian mummies and these Chilean mummies is that, again, the removing of the organs, the wanting to protect the body.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So cool. Well, nice.
Thank you.
Shall I tell you my last bonanza?
Please.
For my final bonanza, I will be telling you about a plot to steal Lincoln's body.
What?
This is by Thomas J. Crowell. It was in U.S. News and World Report on June 24th, 2007. I had never, ever heard this before. I'm curious to see if you have. So, we all know Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president. He was shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth. And in 1876, his body lay in an above-ground white marble sarcophagus in, quote, a handsome tomb on the grounds of Springfield, Illinois' Oak Ridge Cemetery. But there wasn't a lot of security at this cemetery. It sounds like it was a little bit kind of a lame place to be.
This cemetery is lame. It's so uncool.
Like, there wasn't like a watch person. Anyway, the only thing that was between Lincoln's body and would-be grave robbers was a single padlock.
Great. Perfect.
So
Super gonna stop everyone.
it was also, the sarcophagus itself the lid was sealed, but not with cement. It was sealed with plaster of Paris.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a gang of Chicago Irish counterfeiters led by crime boss Big Jim Canali.
Big Jim!
In 1876, Canali's best counterfeit plates engraver, his name is Benjamin Boyd, was sentenced to 10 years in jail for probably crimes regarding counterfeit plates. The very same, I would assume.
For crimes, yeah.
To pressure. I'm sorry, this is my favorite. This is my piece de resistance. So Canali thought that he could pressure the governor to pardon his buddy Boyd. So Canali gathers up his gang, which is Terrence Mullen, a saloon keeper, and Jack Hughes, a, quote, sometime manufacturer of counterfeit nickels. And those two get hired to kidnap Lincoln's body, and they are going to ransom it for $200,000 in cash and a full pardon for their buddy Benjamin Boyd.
Perfect plan.
No problem. Flawless plan. So they don't have any experience in body snatching. So they invite someone named Louis Swagles to the party. They thought he was... okay.
Swaggles? Oh, my buddy Swaggles?
Swegles. I don't know. I think it's Swaggles.
Old nasty hand Swaggles?
So Swaggle actually is an interesting character. He was actually a paid informant of the Secret Service. So they really, truly just asked the wrong guy to be involved in their plan.
Yeah, they really swaggled it.
That's it. So, whatever the night is, it's nighttime. Swaggles and Mullen and Hughes, they go to Oak Ridge Cemetery. And, of course, the Secret Service is waiting for them, hiding, and is watching all this go down. They couldn't pick the lock, so they had to, quote, cut through the padlock with a file. Once they were inside the chamber with the 2-minute, they couldn't lift Lincoln's 500-pound coffin. So
yeah, that's heavy.
That is heavy. They didn't plan for that, probably. They were trying to figure out what to do, and then a detective outside accidentally shot off his pistol.
Oh, geez. Nobody has done this correctly. Not the thieves, not the police.
Everybody is bungling this.
Everybody sucks.
But it does scare them enough, so they run off. They go back to the saloon that one of them owns in Chicago, and then they get arrested a couple days later.
Oh my.
I had no idea that anybody tried to steal Lincoln's body. Did you?
No, they did not. They didn't teach that one in school.
No. So this attempted plot just happened. So in Springfield, someone named John Carroll Power He is the custodian of the tomb, and he's losing it. He's freaking out. If these two idiots, these two jackasses, could get that close to stealing Lincoln's body, literally they shot themselves in the foot by inviting the Secret Service along, basically.
I mean, yeah.
But if they could do it, what happens if professionals actually try to take his body? Like,
yeah, like what if someone who actually knew what they were doing?
Exactly. So he decides to hide Lincoln's body. So him and 5 other people bury Lincoln in this unmarked grave somewhere in the basement. They never speak of it again. They just like keep this secret until 1901, when the president's last surviving son, Robert Lincoln, decides to put his father's body inside a steel cage, lowered into a 10-foot deep vault, and then buried that under a ton of wet concrete.
Jesus fucking Christ. That's where he's at now, right?
That's where Lincoln is. He's still in that crazy ass tomb in Illinois' Oak Ridge Cemetery.
I mean, that's a bonkers tomb, but you really can't blame him.
No. It's I mean, it sounds like that would be traumatizing. We talked about grave robbing a little bit in a previous episode, and I mean, I understand why some grave robbing was going on at the time for science. They couldn't get bodies to dissect in legal ways, so they had to get creative. I get that. But this type of grave robbing, just to get your buddy out of jail so he can help you make more counterfeit bullshit and make $200,000. Like, no, sir. That's traumatizing.
Yeah, exactly. And would have been pretty funny if he had had a grave torpedo or a grave gun.
Oh, but yeah. They should have thought about it. But anyway, the last thing I'm going to say about this, and this is the little cherry on top. So nobody really benefited from this failed crime more than the Secret Service, because of them, they were protecting Lincoln's body, so they became the protectors of the office of the presidency. And obviously, we know what the Secret Service is today. They guard the president and former presidents. So, yeah.
So that's the beginning of the Secret Service?
According to this article from U.S. News and World Report, yeah.
Well, I believe U.S. News and World Report.
I also do. That's a reputable source.
That's nuts.
I know.
It's so funny, but like body snatching is a big part of American history.
It's fascinating. It is a part of our history. I think it's a part of history everywhere. And it seems very old-timey and crazy, but I'm wondering what current grave robbery looks like if that's a problem now, or if this is more of a isolated problem in, the 1900s. What?
I don't think grave robbing is very popular now. All right, very last one. Are you ready for the very last thing?
Tell me the last Bone-anza.
Okay, so this Bone-anza has a little bit of a journey to it.
Okay.
I was looking into what is the oldest, cemetery. And there's a lot of different definitions of cemetery. So that's kind of hard to find. So I found one of the oldest, European, what we think of as cemetery. And it's a German cemetery called, sorry, all of the German people, Gross Friedenwald.
Yeah, good job.
Thanks. But it's a Mesolithic burial site that dates back almost 8,500 years ago.
Wow.
So it's an oldie.
Very old. Yeah, that's when in our last episode, the Scandinavian skulls that I talked about that were found on stakes were from the Mesolithic era, about 8,000 years ago.
Yeah. So this is from a National Geographic article, Mysterious Graves Discovered at Ancient European Cemetery.
Okay.
So why this caught my attention is because there's a man in this graveyard buried standing up.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be here.
No. All right. Let me fill you in. So 9 skeletons have been uncovered on the hilltop of this burial site. 5 of them children, younger than 6 years old. And researchers found evidence that more graves remain to be excavated. So anthropologist Bettina Junklaus, who was one of the excavators working on this find, says, it's rare for the Mesolithic to find multiple graves in one place. They were mobile people ranging over the landscape. This site is interesting also because it's one of the first examples of like group permanent burial.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this dude. So this is a quote from the article.
Okay.
Quote, the man was entombed standing up, together with tools and flint knives. The man's skeleton suggests that he lived a pretty easy life. It doesn't show signs that he did a lot of physical taxing labor. But the strangest thing about him is that the vertical grave was filled in just as far as the man's knees. So he's dead. They've got him in the grave, this vertical grave, and they fill it up to his knees. And then he was allowed to like partially decompose. And then they filled in the rest of the grave and then built a fire on top of the tomb.
What?
Yeah.
Being allowed to partially decompose is the craziest part to me.
Yeah, that they partially buried him standing up. And
so
then,
he was exposed to the elements?
No, I think he's in like a grave, in like a shaft in the ground.
Okay.
And they planted him like a little plant and like filled it up to his knees, let him get gross, and then put in more soil and then lit a fire on top of the grave. One kind of explanation for this type of burial is that there are similar standing burials at this Russian cemetery called Olenji Ostrov.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting because researchers have long assumed that culture flowed into ancient Europe from the south, but these burials kind of suggest that there was active migration from northern Europe. So it shows that these hunter-gatherers were influenced by different cultures of people, and this man could have maybe traveled from another area and then died here and was buried here in this interesting manner.
Huh.
Analysis of his DNA and grave goods lead archaeologists to believe that he was a hunter-gatherer who died about 7,000 years ago. So that's kind of interesting because the grave site itself, like the whole cemetery, is about 8,500 years old. So it kind of implies that people were being buried there for quite some time.
Definitely. Huh.
Buried standing up.
Why? And who did this? And do I want this? I don't think
know.
so.
I want to do more research into standing up burials because that's so wild to me. And I'm sure that it might be practice in other cultures, but I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah. Mark that down for another episode.
Another Bone-anza, perhaps.
Perhaps. I mean, I think I had a great time. So I hope we continue to make this a monthly thing.
Yeah, me too. And remember, if you have Bone-anza stories or topics, shoot them on over to the email or DM us on the Instagram. We always love to hear from you guys. And thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, we're so happy to have this project, this amazing thing to do that in quarantine that also teaches us a lot of things. And I really hope listeners out there are also learning a little fun bone knowledge.
Yeah, and I hope y'all are staying safe, staying smart,
and staying sane.
Yes. Well, there's only one thing I have to say to you, Caitlin. Bon voyage! We'll get it next time.
See ya! Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at anythingbonespodcast or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
At Chubby Scrubby on Twitter.
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
At Camilla Strader on Instagram.
for our beautiful Bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe.
Bone-anza.